Hi everyone, welcome to this first live Q&A. You're joining us from this lovely meadow right by the beaver enclosure at Holnicote. And yeah, start off just by saying thank you to Bloomberg and Admiral who have sort of supported us for both the sort of live camera side of things and then supporting us with the latest wild release of beaver. And yeah, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Matt. I work with Jack in the beaver world here at Holnicote. And then Jack's the beaver officer here, and he's going to give us a bit of an intro on the project. So send your questions in, and then yeah, we'll start answering your questions.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. Yeah, hi folks. Nice to meet you all, or meet you all. I'm not sure what you say really. Yeah, big thanks to the tech support as well from behind the scenes, because this wouldn't have been happening otherwise. My name's Jack Siviter. I am the beaver project officer, beaver and wetland project officer for the National Trust at the Holnicote Estate. I've been working at the Holnicote Estate for almost 11 years now, and I've been working on the beaver project for about 5.5, 6 years. Yeah, it's been an amazing project. So I'll give you a quick summary before we start answering questions. So hopefully I'll cover some of the stuff you guys want to hear now, and then we'll get over to the questions, and we'll just give everyone a few more minutes to drop some questions in the chat. So the project at Holnicote has been running since 2020. We've got we started with 2 beaver enclosures, so we had 2 pairs of beavers in 2 beaver enclosures separated by a couple of kilometres of river. Those beavers have been happily breeding and multiplying over the last few years, and we've kind of worked through for the past 5 years managing numbers and having to move teenagers on from beaver families into new sites and new places throughout the UK. But at the time there was no way of doing a full wild beaver release. In 2026 legislation changed with government, and we got to the point that we could move into a full wild release. So we were really lucky, and we're we're the third to go ahead. So we have now released a number of beaver families and pairs into our river catchments, and the beavers that you guys have been watching on the live cameras were from one of the original enclosures, but they're also able to exit those enclosures now. So the enclosure still exists, partly to give the beavers some privacy, but also they have the ability to move in and out of those enclosures as they see fit. Does that seem reasonably good?
I do. We'll start with some questions then. So the first question we were asked by Renardine9 is how many beavers are on site? And then you did sort of touch upon this, but is the pond fenced off to prevent them from escaping?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are approximately 22 to 25 beavers on the Holnicote Estate. We've had the 2 enclosures breeding for the past 5 years, and we have introduced 11 new animals to the system. So when we got our wild release licence, we introduced 1 family that were captured in Scotland and translocated because they were causing problems in Scotland. And then we've also released a number of individuals, so 3 boys, 3 girls, that will hopefully pair off in the catchment and start their own territories and families. So yeah, quite a number now.
And yeah, to confirm, so there is technically still a fence
Yeah.
On the sort of beaver cam you're watching, or surrounding the beaver cam you're watching, but not fully beaver proof
Yeah,
anymore.
so the fence is leaky, let's put it that way. So the animals can come and go as they see. Is that beavers don't eat meat or fish. I think that's quite important to get out there. So these guys are herbivores. People get caught up on the fact that they fell trees, and they do that for food, but they also spend a lot of their summer foraging on kind of lush grasses and soft vegetation, we would call it, so soft feeding. So they'll eat a lot of aquatic kind of marginal plants, as well as aquatic plants, as well as kind of rushes and sedges, and they'll even eat things like brambles and nettles, and nettles are a really good way of them obtaining iron, which goes into their teeth, which is quite a nice little fact. So I think that, I mean, I can't remember the exact figure, I think something like 330 species have been recorded in beaver diets, but in terms of trees, they do particularly like willow, aspen, poplar, things like that. So those kind of soft, fast-growing wetland trees.
Nice one. This is a question where we could like spend the whole hour listing of species, but Ben Early asked, what other species do beavers benefit?
That is a good question, Ben. So there's a huge range of species. So I think one of the reasons we are focusing on beavers at the Holnicote Estate is because they are ecosystem engineers. They shape the environment around them, and they create wetlands out of degraded kind of stream systems and rivers. That gives them and kind of uncanny ability to bring in other wildlife, because those wetland systems are incredibly diverse. So the species that you might find, so we'll focus on the site that we've been watching. We've had waterfowl move into the site, which is pretty amazing, a red listed species, and they're doing fairly well. We guys have all been watching the night heron, which I think is a new record for the Holnicote Estate, so that's pretty exciting for us as well as a team to see that. And without the live camera running, we've probably never seen it, so that's pretty fantastic. We also see, we've had fish move into the site which were no longer there, and they've taken a site that had almost zero standing water and created about 1.5 hectares of wetland. And that kind of activity is slightly compressed because at the time they were fenced in. But it's just the range of invertebrates and dragonflies and damselflies and amphibians that we see in the site is all food for everything else, and that's why you're starting to see those herons and night herons and things like that use the wetlands. And especially in this heat wave, me and Matt are currently sat baking in a field and get signal in the beaver enclosure, and it's absolutely phenomenal.
You did sort of answer a question that was asked about, so are there waterfalls in the ponds?
Yeah.
And then in the same question, Renadine asked, do otters visit the lodge?
Wow, that's a good question. So otters will predate beaver kits. Now that's totally natural. We're all about creating these food webs and this ecology that allows everything to thrive. So the beavers are not only creating the habitat for the otters, because the habitat just wasn't there before, but they're also obviously drawing a potential predator into their enclosure. So I'm sure otters have tried to visit the lodges. There is plenty of trail camera footage floating around the UK of beavers chasing otters off, and I think you've seen that on some of the footage over the last few weeks. What was the rest of the question, Matt? Sorry.
If they visit the lodge, I'm guessing it's about predation and...
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen it, but I would imagine they do try. I mean, an adult beaver is not something that an otter wants to deal with, but a kit is a fairly big snack. And we've seen one beaver kit so far on the camera. Who knows? There's been a lot of otter activity. Maybe there were more than that before, but we won't know that these. We didn't get that sight and all that footage on camera, so we'll never really know.
Yeah. Do you know if that's just my personal question following up on that, but do you know if a parent beaver would ever leave a kit on its own in the lodge?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Yeah, I think parents do pop in and out. I don't think they would be there 100% of the time.
Cool. That's a quite interesting question as well. Someone asks, is there an issue with interbreeding?
Okay, I thought there was going to be more to
that.
No. So beavers will breed with their siblings or related individuals. It is possible. They are rodent. They are incredibly robust, but we are quite lucky in the UK in that the genetics of beavers are probably some of the most diverse in Europe, which is actually really good news for us. And with our wild release, we've worked really hard to bring in animals from all over the country. So we've had animals right from Dorset, the Forest of Dean, Cheshire, Scotland. There's others that I'm struggling to recall off the top of my head.
Yes.
But yeah, we've managed to source our animals from all over the country. The original beavers in the UK were sourced from Europe, so this is a Eurasian beaver, different to kind of American or Canadian beaver. And one of the problems with having the enclosures is that you do have to manage that system. So while the kind of dominant pair, it's kind of, if you think of beavers like having a wolf pack, you'll have a kind of dominant male and female that are the breeding pair, and everyone else is kind of subservient, and that's normally the offspring and teenagers. Those beavers will stay with that family unit for 2 to 3 years. With the enclosures, we have to go in and manage that situation, so they obviously can't disperse naturally, so we would spend quite a lot of our time trapping over winter to remove teenagers and send them off to other projects. And I mean, it's probably been updated since I last checked, but there was at one point there was about 47, 48 different enclosures in the UK. So this is kind of a widespread thing now.
And we work with the Beaver Trust quite closely, don't we? And they've got a stud book, so we've got a reasonable idea of all the beavers in the UK that have been captured at least once, where they're from, and sort of we're able to make sure when we introduce the beavers, they're not closely related.
Yeah, that's 100% right. Yeah, so yeah, that's absolutely the right thing to do as well. It gives our beavers the best chance of being as genetically diverse as possible, and by working with our partners, like key partners like the Beaver Trust and the Wildlife Trust and other people, we can manage that situation. Named our beavers. So in the enclosures, so the enclosure you guys have been watching, the female is called Grylls and the male's called Yogi. Yogi's the biggest beaver on site. He's a big old boy. He's 26.5 kilos the last time I trapped him, but that was probably 12 months ago. So he's a hefty old animal. Kind of average for a beaver would be kind of 22, 23 kilos as an adult, and they can go up to about 30 kilos. There were some other named individuals, and I'm going to struggle to recall them all. Some have been sent off to other projects, and some are still here. I did selfishly name one Jack once.
And George, my predecessor.
My old Ranger. Who have we got? We've got Grylls. Rashford's no longer here.
Oh.
Then we got Russo and Toon. And then we had, I'm trying to remember them all now. In the other enclosure, we had bulrush and lily, and their offspring were like fern and moss. And so we had a bit of a plant thing going on in the other enclosure. But we are trying to kind of normalise beavers a little bit and kind of move away from naming. I'm more than happy for you guys to name the kit in the enclosure. But to kind of, once that these animals are now wild animals, and to kind of, from a practical point of view, it's kind of unhelpful. The animals are really hard to tell apart as individuals until once they get about 2 years old. The only way to tell them apart is handle them and hope that they've got a microchip. And anything that's born on the estate won't be being microchipped at this point because they're wild animals. So we'll keep an eye on whatever this beaver gets called, Justin Bieber or Marcus Nashford. But it's going to be hard for us to give regular updates on whatever it gets called after about the first 12 months.
So it's a good problem to have, because essentially we've now got too many beavers.
Yeah, we're running out of the ability to tell what's going on.
We're very happy about that as a problem.
Yeah.
What's the lifespan of a beaver?
So a beaver, that's a good question. So beavers, sort of on average, a beaver, the textbook will tell you a beaver lives 12 to 14 years. I've done some trapping on other sites, and we caught a beaver in the Tamar catchment that we think was 17 years old. But he was pretty grey in the face, so I think that was pushing it a little bit. So I mean, probably if one was doing really, really well, it'd get to 20 years old. But a kind of average life expectancy would be 12 to 14 years.
And I'm sorry, I'm sort of jumping between loads of questions and not necessarily reading them in the same order, but I really like this one. What's your favourite fact about beavers?
My favourite fact about beavers? Oh, that's really tough.
I've got one.
What's your favourite fact about beavers?
So beavers have evolved to live in quite cold countries, and so they create food caches. So that's basically a stash of food that they collect when they can get in and out of their ponds quite easily and there's food growing. And then if it freezes over, they can basically go out of the burrow into the food cache, get what they need, and then back in the burrow out. And they can survive for months, which I think is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. I guess quite an interesting fact about beavers is you can't gender them. So, well, you can, but you can't do it visually. So the only way to gender a beaver is to get quite hands-on and, for want of a better term, invert things. They've got a cloaca, so it's almost like a flat plate at the back, and to sex a beaver takes a specialist license and quite a lot of experience and time. And it is something we do here, but it is not still not easy. So I guess that's probably my favourite beaver fact, maybe.
I mean, yeah.
That is a tough question, though.
That's going to be difficult to answer, but as we can look at it more generally. You can maybe hear a helicopter above us, but how long did it take for them to build the dam? So I'm guessing there's multiple dams in the system that people are watching, but
yeah,
how long does it take a beaver to build a dam? Which is, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been following obviously the live camera and some of the chats, not every single day, but I tend to check in once a day and see what's been going on. So I know there's been a lot of chat about where the dam is and and I think first of all, there's within the three, we'll just talk about the enclosure because it makes life simpler. Within that 3 hectare enclosure, there's probably 9 or 10 dams now dotted, so you get all ponds down through a valley. Just dam, they'll create a new one. On the live camera, the closest dam is to the right of it. So, and the reason they're on that site is because it is an old mill pond that was empty with gaps where the sluices used to be. And all the beavers had to do was dam up the sluice holes. So it made a really easy site for them to kind of establish and get going, and a nice big, I don't think we can call it a lake, a nice big pond. But I did try and get in there the other day, and that pond is remarkably deep. So yeah, multiple dams within the system. In terms of, some of the dams are 8 foot wide, and some of the dams are 40, 50 foot wide. So it very much depends on what they're trying to do. Me and Matt were at a different site earlier, and one of the dams is taller than Matt's head.
And I'm of average height.
And he's not very, yeah. And the first dam we ever had built, which I thought was a joke, I thought my apprentice had built it, took a weekend, because I went down there on the Friday and it wasn't there, and I went back on the Monday evening and there was a dam. And I was like,
a metre high?
Yeah, it was probably 40 centimetres high at that point, and maybe a couple metres wide. And it kind of grew and grew and grew. But they can be remarkably quick at putting dams in. Is it worth touching on why they do that?
I guess so, yeah.
Well, we're
useful.
on dams.
Yeah.
I don't want to keep jumping around too
much.
No,
but...
so beavers build dams to feel safe. That's really what it's all about. So they don't live in the dam. Just clear that up, I get that quite a lot. The dam is there to hold water back in a system, and beavers feel safest when they've got about 70 centimetres of water. So what they'll do is, and their food is out quite often out of the water, so what they'll do is back water up to a food supply to allow them to feed and forage in safety. So if they hear a wolf coming along, not that we've got any, or a Labrador, they can drop into the water and disappear. Whereas if that water's very shallow, of course, they're much more vulnerable to predation. So that's really why they're dam building. And the benefits to us and the rest of the wildlife are extreme, but as far as the beaver's concerned, all they're doing is creating a nice safe home for themselves.
And on the topic of dam, we had a question about, what was the exact question? Do beavers cause flooding?
So, okay, so I was hoping we'd get some controversial questions.
Yeah, so, it's important.
Beavers have the ability to cause flooding, but they do not generally cause flooding. A lot of data, so in Europe there's 1.2 million beavers, and Europe is seemingly coping just fine.
Maybe a bit dry even.
Maybe a bit dry
right
still, yeah. These animals are only going to exist where the water is, and they will shape that environment to suit themselves. If they do that in the wrong place, yes, you could have a problem, but we have the ability so the reason me and Matt exist on this estate and have a job is so that we can kind of optimise the benefits of beavers and that water system, but we're also there to facilitate if there are any issues or if dams appear in the wrong place. So the river Otter in Devon has had beavers on it since 2015 or just before that. Very few instances of flooding there. If anything, the opposite is true, that the slowing of water down through the catchment in the right place helps to alleviate flooding further downstream. So that water has much more friction and time to move through a system. So rather than whooshing through like a drain, it has to slowly percolate through a series of dams and fallen trees, and then it will reconnect with the floodplain and it goes left and right, and it just takes everything much longer. I mean, one of the pieces, you know, we've done a lot of river restoration on this estate, and a landscape we created which was very similar to what a beaver landscape looks like has shown a 40% reduction in flood peak, which is kind of really significant. And we do have some downstream communities here that hopefully are seeing the benefits of that. I mean, it's possibly too early to tell, but the data is certainly suggesting that we are slowing water down and taking the edge off in those flooding events.
Yeah. That's a question I actually don't know, and I hope you do know. Do beavers' teeth get replaced over their lifespan?
That's a good question. No. So, well, it depends how you want to view it. They've basically got a load of tooth, like, I don't know, I'm trying to envision it in a straight line.
Yeah.
So it kind of curls, if we focus on they've got two teeth at top and bottom, the big main ones that they fell trees with, and they're rodents, and their teeth just kind of come forward over time. And I guess there is a moment in time where they'll run out of tooth, and that's kind of that. But I've seen beaver skulls, and the teeth are, you know, there's probably at least 5 or 6 inches of tooth there, with only maybe 2 inches showing. So they've got a significant amount, and they're reinforced with iron, so they take a very long time to wear down.
It's nice to see you. We've got Admiral in the chat saying we're proud to be supporting.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, Admiral. Don't know. An adult beaver from head to tail. That has got to be, I think I'm going to quote a number, and I could be slightly off. I think it's about 1.3 metres. Something like that. So you've got body's probably the best part of a metre, and you've probably got another 30 centimetres of tail, 30, 40 centimetres of tail. But I'll be perfectly honest, I can't remember exactly. But it's, yeah, I'd say between 1.2 and 1.5 metres is probably a reasonable guess.
Yeah, maybe.
There's some, I've wrestled a few beavers, and they are pretty big.
I'll move back to, so we've got some questions that have been sort of asked before we went live. This is quite an interesting one. What impact will this have on fish species that need free-flowing water to spawn?
That's a good question. So we are doing a really in-depth fish study at Holnicote at the moment, working alongside the Beaver Trust, and we'll hopefully get some papers out just so we can have that proper kind of robust evidence. So we have, I'll go right back to the start. So in the systems that we have at the Holnicote Estate on Exmoor, we've got resident brown trout, European eel, brook lamprey, come on Jack, what else have we got? Stone loach, bullhead, very good.
Did you say eels? You mentioned
yeah,
eels?
that's they're probably on average 4 metres wide, 5 metres wide, but quite flashy. Trout numbers on this estate have been seemingly falling for a little while. We've got a long-term data set that the Environment Agency started collecting and then stopped, and we've picked that up over the last few years, and we've been doing quite robust electrofishing surveys to kind of see how beavers interact with see how fish interact with not only beavers but also the river restoration work we've done here. And what beavers are really fantastic at is creating these amazing deep pools that are very complex in terms of not only the substrate but also cover for fish. And we are seeing seemingly an uptick in fish numbers since we've begun restoring our river systems, adding more complex woody structures and essentially just creating more space for fish within the system. So rather than having a very long reach that was all very similar, it's quite gravelly and, you know, kind of what you might call classic trout country. We've now got a series of kind of riffles and pools and complex wetlands throughout the system that give opportunities for the fish at different stages of their life cycle. So I think generally beavers have been shown in Scotland to be certainly not bad for fish, in a lot of places good for trout. And there's some studies you can, if you want to look that up, you can look at some of the stuff the Beaver Trust have done up there. But I'm pretty confident. We had a fish survey done in the last few weeks and in all the transects we've done, our fish numbers have increased, and that's with beavers in the catchment. So I don't want to sound too soon, and there will be complexities to all this. Nothing is black and white, but generally what you end up with is more habitat. You get more water, deeper pools in these heat spells, so the fish can hide, more invertebrates in the system, more food, and they can hide better from predators. So there is moments where there is potentially blockers to fish passage, but it's not as simple as that, and actually those fish are often receiving the resources they need in those beaver systems, and they don't necessarily need to move at that point. And then at higher flows, dams can become quite easily passable. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, no, I think it does, yeah. And it was interesting earlier, like walking in quite an established beaver pond, which I always sort of assume with quite a silted environment, which is not necessarily great for spawning. And actually we were seeing that there was some like gravelly runs, even in like a very stagnant, which I'd never really seen before.
I think, yeah, it's really interesting. I think what was happening there is, I think where the beavers, they'll use almost like road networks. They'll kind of follow paths that they know, and they'll keep them clear. And I think what we were seeing there was the beavers clearing silt out of these flow paths and creating these kind of gravelly systems within the deep pools, which would be really interesting to see how that does interact with trout. But I don't have the answers right now, because this stuff's, we've been doing it for 6 years. Yeah.
So far, so good. We haven't killed all the fish.
No, the fish seem to be doing, if anything, better. So it's really good news.
It's a simpler question. Not true.
I think so.
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to come with like something.
No. I mean, I've not seen one stay underwater for 15 minutes, but everyone quotes 15 minutes as kind of their maximum capacity. So they're very good at dealing with low oxygen environments, so they can hide for quite a long time, and they are very good at hiding.
That's a more complicated question. Could there ever be too many beavers so that the benefits they provide in terms of water management tip over into damage to woodland?
Oh, good question.
It's hard.
No,
I don't think so either.
So I think the overall answer will be no. I think as beaver numbers expand and we get more of them, you can see behind me, hopefully there's some trees. So that is part of the beaver enclosure, and there's still very much trees there, and they've been there for the last 6 years. And at one point we had almost 10 animals in that enclosure. To move through there, it was a woodland setting, and it's still a woodland setting, just with some deeper pools and some glades in it. So a lot of the work they do is typically what we would do from a conservation point of view. They can also persist in environments without too many trees. I've been over to Bavaria in Germany and seen them, and they are quite happily and up in Scotland, and they're quite happily living in arable ditches and field systems, because again, a lot of what they feed on is this soft vegetation, and if they've got deep water, they don't really need to do any damming. So if you've got the Thames running behind your house, there's no way a beaver's going to go and dam that. They'll be quite happy because the water's deep enough as it is. There will be probably areas of conflict, but I think forestry has already started to pivot. We were at the Beaver Conference recently in Newcastle, and we were attending lots of training events which were looking at how do you plant woodlands with beavers in mind, and quite the thinking at the moment seems to just be a little bit of offset planting, so plant things like willow and poplars in the riparian corridor, and kind of plant your less favourable tree species slightly further back. All this stuff's about space, and we definitely have the space in this country to accommodate beavers and have a thriving kind of woodland systems, as well as kind of forestry industry, if that's what we want. I think there's certainly less of a threat to woodlands than things like deer, grey squirrels. So, if you really want to grow nice straight cricket bat willows, you might need to fence those off. But other than that, I think we're going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and if anything, so in the beaver enclosure, the management they've done in terms of coppicing, which basically they almost manage the woodland like we would manage the woodland, but they do it better and they do it for free. So we've probably got one of the healthiest bit of woodland now, because we've got a lot more standing deadwood because some trees have flooded or they've ring-barked trees. We've got a lot more deadwood on the ground. They're just doing the sort of management that we would do anyways. So if anything, it's probably a healthy thing for the woodland. And then they won't be able to get to every woodland because it needs to be reasonably close to water. So
yeah, I think that's it. I think it's all about space and being. They are a messy animal. I love a bit of mess. but not everyone does. And I think it's just understanding that actually that mess intrinsically has value to wildlife and to us, because we get the ecosystem benefits from the pollinators and all those other, and just ecotourism as well, and all those nice things that come from having a more kind of wildlife-rich country.
That's a nice one. What's the most unexpected benefit of having beavers at Holnicote?
Wow. Unexpected.
I guess for me, it's seeing some of the species that we've seen interact with our re-wetted landscape already. Like, you just don't expect a night heron to turn up
At Holnicote.
at Holnicote.
No.
When they've never been seen in living memory.
No.
As far as we've got rangers that have been working here for 40 years, and that's the first time we ever see a night heron, and it's probably because we've got better wetland habitat now.
Yeah, it's definitely because we've got better. I mean, and I think for me I've developed a lot of quite strong positive relationships with local communities and people around here that I possibly wouldn't have reached out to otherwise, because you can post a live chat and people send loads and loads of questions in, because there are species that people love or they hate or they divide opinion a little bit, but they're really intriguing species. And I think for me, nice to me. So I think that's probably the thing that surprised me most, is how well they've been received in this landscape. Which is really encouraging.
When are they awake and when are they asleep, and why is that?
So, that's a good question. So they're pretty much, we call them crepuscular, or essentially nocturnal. They tend to, I tend to think of the beaver's working day is 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. So hopefully that tracks on the live camera and they're not popping out at 3:30 in the afternoon. Although I have noticed that in this hot weather they do seem to be coming out a little bit earlier. I would say, so they're working through the night. I guess that's predator avoidance tactics. Their eyesight's very poor, so they don't see well, but they have a very good sense of smell, so I guess working at night makes a lot more sense for that. I can only assume it's predator. Was that, and I've forgotten it.
No, that was it.
Yeah, so I guess it's that really, but it does make them a little bit tricky to monitor.
And something that's been asked.
Roughly? They'd be roughly looking south, and you are kind of peering to the right-hand side of the maternal lodge. There are multiple burrows and lodges within the system now. It's quite an old territory, obviously. It's been there almost 6 years, which gives the beavers a lot of ability to disappear and hide and come up different places. Very tricky to place a live camera in a beaver enclosure and try and guarantee you guys are going to get enough footage to keep you interested, but I hope it's been interesting and worth it. But it's certainly been interesting for us to see what else is turning up, and it has changed the way I monitor as well, because I'm using less trail cams because I've got that live feed and you guys give me those timestamps so I know what's going on, so that's been really helpful.
I'll try and rephrase that question because I don't think I can ask it the way it's been written. So it's a question about castoreum, which is what is castoreum?
What is castoreum? That's a good. It's like a scent gland.
Yeah. And then someone was asking if you can make ice cream from castoreum.
We'll call it castor. So that is produced. Beavers have got a complicated kind of back end, basically. So that's a scent gland essentially that's used for marks. So they hold territories, beavers. I probably, if I go over all ground, I do apologise. They'll hold territories and they'll scent mark, and they'll leave little scent mounds on the edges of their territories. The castor's used for that. Historically, one of the reasons beavers were hunted to extinction was for not only meat and fur, but also for their castor gland, and that was used in perfumes and things like that. It makes it, having been covered in it, it clings. It's a very clingy liquid, I think's the nicest way of putting it. And but if you mixed it with lavender or something like that, it would mean that your perfume would stay on for longer. Before kind of I mean, I don't even know, a perfume's synthetic? Anyway, let's not get into perfumes. Yeah. But that was also used in food products and for medicine, so it was thought to have kind of medicinal properties, and it possibly the amount of willow they eat, it possibly does have a kind of aspirin-like effect on people. But it has also been used in kind of sweets and as like a gelatin replacement, I think, without getting too detailed. But I don't think it is used in that anymore. It would be illegal. But you can eat beaver in European countries. They're not as widely protected as they are here.
Got a few more questions, but we're starting to dry up. Someone goes out hoping to spot a beaver. What's your top tip?
Well, that's a good question. Top tip, be the right side of the wind, because they smell. So that's the way they're going to find you. You could probably stand... I've sat 3 foot away from a beaver and it's not noticed me because it couldn't see me. But if the wind's blowing the wrong direction and taking your scent towards it, you want to avoid that. Make sure you're out there before they emerge, so try and get out on site. If you work on that 7 till 7 principle, try and get out on site sort of 6:30, something like that, get set up quietly somewhere, and don't give up, because they can be tricksy.
Yeah.
Sneaky is the term, isn't it, for beavers? Sneaky beavers.
And there's now places like the River Otter where they're easier to see. There's sort of known spots where they seem to have adjusted to having people around, and they're probably a bit
100%.
Easier to
There's
see.
a lot of places in the UK now you can go and watch wild beavers fairly easily. Honeycote's not yet one of them. It's getting there, and it will probably in 5-10 years' time will probably be lots of places you can wander around and see beavers, but we just don't have enough established yet for it to be accessible for people. So we do run in-person tours as well as these. Well, this is our first live Q&A. It might not be the last. We'll see how it goes down. Yeah, just don't give up. And I'm pretty sure on the River Otter there's a pub you can sit at and have a pint and watch beavers. So maybe that's the answer.
That sounds pretty good. Something I don't think we've really covered is so do beavers live in groups, and how many groups?
Generally, so kind of beaver ecology, the male and the female will pair up for life. So they'll stay together as long as those two animals are existing. That's normally 2 to 3 years of age. They'll set up a territory that they'll defend from other beavers. They can be quite violent with each other. And they will generally have offspring, so they can only breed once per year. And those offspring will be, you've just seen beavers come out, so those offspring are generally born in late spring, early summer. They'll spend 6 weeks in the lodge, and then they will emerge into the real world. And they're still pretty reliant on mum and dad, but they're not, they're eating solids and things, and they're just like a guinea pig-sized beaver at that point. A family unit will have, I think the average is about 5 animals, but we've had much bigger densities than that. I know there's a site in the UK that's had 5 kits born, so that family's already, there's at least 7 there. So and those animals will stay with the family for 2 to 3 years generally. So you could well have 2 kits born every year, so a family would look like 6 animals, something like that. So that would probably be fairly standard.
Nice. Do you know how old the oldest beaver at Holnicote is? Someone asks.
Should do.
That would be Yogi probably, or Grylls.
Yeah, I think it's Yogi. Yogi would be the oldest beaver at Holnicote. I think he was. I could probably do the maths quickly. He turned up, I think, in 21. He was probably 3 then. So I reckon he's getting on for 8, something like that.
Which is pretty
good. He's probably peaking as a beaver, but he's a big greedy boy and he likes a parsnip.
Yeah, and that's another funny fact is so you've tried to trap out of paddocks, which is the beaver enclosure, a lot.
Yeah.
And then Yogi loves to go in the
some
trap.
beavers just like a trap. They're happy to take the hit with the parsnips and the carrots for a night in a trap, which is not great. Last winter, didn't seem bothered by it at all.
Quite like this question as well. What's the funniest thing you've ever seen one of the Holnicote beavers do?
Well, it's going to be quite hard to top the sneezing incident, isn't it?
Sneezing was quite
sneezing was pretty funny.
They just do quite we do a lot of trail camera surveys, so we've got cameras that just record things for us. And then you'll see like 99% of the clips is quite like a regular, not much happening beaver just floating about, and then they start like weirdly shaking or scratching in a funny way. Or
I don't know what the funniest thing we've seen them do. We've never seen them mate yet.
No.
I've never seen that on camera, which happens in the water.
They had it. Was it Purbeck this
somewhere
winter?
Somewhere filmed that. I don't think we can beat the sneeze. I think the sneeze is still the funniest thing we've seen from the beavers.
Someone says this needs to turn into a regular podcast.
Wicked. I'm down for it.
How long is the beaver pregnancy?
108 days.
That's very precise.
Well, I've got to be precise, haven't you? So it's about 3.5 months. So the beaver calendar is they'll come into sort of season, if you want to call it that, in winter. So they'll mate. There's a 3-month window they can mate in, which is sort of December to February. They'll mate. 108 days gestation. Kits are then born late spring or mid-spring to early summer, and that is the only window they have. And you have an average of 2 to 3 kits each year. So to only have one is slightly unusual, but not unheard of. I think that's the first year we had breeding here. We only had 1 kit born, but we have had triplets before out of this enclosure. So I think it very much depends on things happening inside that lodge that we're not aware of, and it's complicated, I guess. But so 108 days gestation, without rambling on too much.
Cool. Well, I think this is it, Jack.
That's it. We've run out.
We've run out of questions. I think it was all right.
Cool. Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
And the batteries didn't run out, and we've got signal. And
yes, hopefully it was all good. All good on your side too. Thank you very much for tuning in. We might. So we're potentially going to do this next week as well. We'll communicate on the time a bit closer to the date, but there'll be opportunities for more questions. So feel free to send some questions in the chat the next few days, or just tune in and send questions then. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well done, Matt.
Cheers.
Thanks very much to everyone for watching.
Bye.
Take it easy.